She was.
She was.
You want to say which?
Judge, you ready?
Does this work?
No, that doesn't.
Oh,
that's,
those
that's
aren't.
for the live stream. This is one of those.
All right. So I hold it. Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Are you ready?
I'm ready when you are.
Home run.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll have your seats, we'll get started. It's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Tom Rose, Federal Court Judge.
Thank you, Barry.
It's on.
Is it on? Okay. I usually don't need one of these, but. James H. Martin, age 101, passed away peacefully at his home on September the 11th, 2022. A renowned World War II veteran, Jim was one of the last remaining airborne TOCA originals of 1942. Jim Pee Wee Martin was born April the 29th, 1921, to the late James A. and Beatrice L. Martin in Portage, Pennsylvania. His family moved to Indiana when Jim was 6 months old, finally settling in Dayton, Ohio in 1931. After graduating from Kaiser High School in 1939, Jim worked in the precision tool manufacturing industry and was employed by the Johnson Tool and Engineering Company. In 1941, when the United States became fully engaged in the Second World War, Jim refused deferment from military draft because he felt, and I quote, "It was unjustifiable for a young guy such as me, with no family ties, not to join the Army." Jim enlisted in the Army in June of 1942. Jim trained and served in the 101st Airborne Division, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 3rd Battalion G Company, from 1942 to 1945. In July of 1942, Jim was one of those 6,500 men to arrive at Currahee Mountain near Toka, Georgia, for training as a new type of soldier, a paratrooper. He was one of Colonel Sink's original Toka men who were preparing to defend the free world from the German offensive that was World War II. Being the lightest man in the regiment, he was given the nickname Pee Wee, which he was very proud of. In 1943, the 506th traveled to England by ship, and Jim's battalion was stationed in Ramsbury in Wiltshire, where they completed their pre-invasion training. Jim participated in 3 pivotal battles of the war: Operation Overlord, the Battle of Normandy, France; Operation Market Garden, Holland; the Ardennes, I messed that one up, Ardennes Offensive, Belgium, which was the Battle of the Bulge. The 101st Airborne Division ended their war by occupying Adolf Hitler's mountain home, Eagle's Nest, in Berchtesgaden, Bavaria, in May of 1945. After the war, Jim returned to the tool manufacturing industry. He married his long-time love, Donna V. Ververka of Newton, Iowa, in 1946. Shortly after, they purchased 52 acres of land in Sugar Creek Township, Greene County, Ohio, where, with their own two hands, they built their dream home. Jim and Donna raised 5 children. After nearly 73 years of marriage, Donna passed in 2019. Over the years, as you all know, Jim helped keep history alive by attending many speaking engagements and traveling to events commemorating the war and celebrating freedom, such as the anniversaries of D-Day in Normandy, France, and Market Garden in Holland. At the ages of 93 and 98, respectively, Jim recreated his jumps in those historic engagements of World War II. At the age of 99, Jim made his last jump in October of 2020 at an event sponsored by the Round Canopy Parachute Team USA in Pawtucket, Florida. Jim was preceded in death by his loving wife Donna, his sons David J. Martin, Donna L. Martin, and daughter Deborah K. Martin. He is survived by daughter Linda S. Martin and son Roger J. Martin, 8 grandchildren, 9 great-grandchildren, and obviously a host of friends. Ladies and gentlemen, I first met Jim Pee Wee Martin about 50 years ago. That meeting affected the rest of my life. For about 5 years, Jim and I, for the most part, were adversaries. I was an assistant prosecutor, civil division director, representing political subdivisions. I don't even need a joke here, I know. And Jim was a concerned citizen. Now, when I say concerned, I mean concerned. Jim was a challenge. You can just picture a young prosecuting attorney coming up against Jim Pee Wee Martin. But by challenging, what I meant is that he came at me prepared, that he came at me knowledgeable. He had researched the issue. He knew what the law was. In simple terms, he came at me with guns blazing. Whether it was zoning or any of the other many issues that face townships and counties and their citizens, Jim was an advocate. And Jim was an advocate for what he thought was right. And he wouldn't hesitate to correct me. Matter of fact, as I walked up that center aisle, I looked at him and I'm still a little bit concerned he's going to say something to me that I said something wrong. My real problem with Jim was, more times than not, he had a good argument. And even worse, he was right. But fortunately, the result of those battles, those skirmishes, those arguments, which he totally enjoyed, was that I developed a deeply instilled respect for this man of honesty, this man of integrity, this man who meant what he said and stood behind it no matter what. I began to easily realize this man of slight build indeed possessed the qualities of what I call an upstander. An upstander is an individual that stands up for what he believes is right. Under whatever circumstances, he'll put up a fight. And another term for upstander is hero. One that really did not hesitate and agreed to serve his country for all of us. Now, strangely enough, all that adversarial relationship was the beginning of a deep and lasting friendship between Jim and I, with Donna, his wife, and the Martin family. Over the years, in our many conversations, we had a lot. Matter of fact, we had one just 2 weeks, I think, prior to his passing. You could feel his deep dedication. You could feel his love of freedom. Not only his love of freedom, but for this country and all it stands for. Those feelings, regardless of age, never dimmed. Fortunately, tonight, we have a number of people here to tell you about Jim Martin. You all know him, but maybe there's something that someone has experienced that will give you a little smile, make you remember. Because in looking at that in-depth look of this man, this upstander, this hero, not only as a soldier, but as a family man and a citizen. Before I turn the podium over to those folks, I'd just like to share, I'll admit, I'm a country western singer, and not singer. I love country western music. I know everybody was there, let's leave, he's gonna start singing, but I just want to quote, I'm not gonna sing it, I just want to quote some words from one of my favorite artists, Toby Keith. The American soldier. I don't do it for money. There's bills that I can't pay. I don't do it for the glory. I just do it anyway. Providing for our futures is my responsibility. Yeah, I'm real good under pressure, and sometimes, and being all that I can be. And I can't call in sick on Mondays. When the weekend's been too strong, I just work straight through the holidays, and sometimes all night long. You can bet that I stand ready when the wolf growls at the door. Hey, I'm solid. Hey, I'm steady. Hey, I'm true down to the core. And I'll always do my duty, no matter what the price. I've counted up the cost. I know the sacrifice. Oh, I don't want to die for you, but if dying's asked of me, I'll bear that cross with honor, 'cause freedom don't come free. I'm an American soldier, an American beside my brothers and sisters, I will proudly take a stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I will always do what's right. I'm out here on the front lines. Sleep in peace tonight. Jim, rest in peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present Jim's granddaughter, who I will have to say has done a yeoman's job in putting this all together. Jody.
Thank you, Judge Rose. Hope I can find my words. Many of you here tonight know my grandpa as James Hunter Martin. Some of you know him as Jimmy Martin, and some of you know him as Jim Martin. What we all know and can relate to him as is Jim Pee Wee Martin, 506 G Company, 101st Airborne Division. Airborne all the way. Where are my guys? My airborne guys. But what I know him best as is just my Grandpa Martin. My Grandpa Martin was a humble man. He was a simple man. He was a hard worker. Days at Grandma and Grandpa Martin's as a young child would start before the sun was up with the smell of pancakes coming from my grandma's kitchen. It was first at their dining room table I discovered eating peanut butter on pancakes, and I still do that today. Yes, I do. As a little girl, days seemed to last forever there. From swimming in the pond, we would walk the lane, hike the paths. Grandma could identify every tree, every bird, every leaf, every flower, every weed. She would still find time to do crafts with us and bake with us. And through all of that, she managed to make 3 meals a day. All while my grandpa was working, either on their land, running down the steps to his Ford truck in his white t-shirt, his suspenders, and his metal toolbox, or not toolbox, but lunchbox, and Grandma had prepared his lunch, and he always had his newspaper under his arm. Or I remember as a little girl, him sitting in his favorite spot in his living room with the cord stretched from the dining room on the telephone, talking about some sort of situation either in the township or the county or beyond, sometimes till very late at night. Grandpa was always working. What my Grandma and Grandpa Martin have taught me is stability. They've taught me tradition. They've taught me to never give up. If you get knocked down, you try that much harder. They didn't teach me that by their words, but by their actions and everything that I observed them always doing. So probably about, 8 or 10 years ago, my Grandma and Grandpa Martin would come and see my boys and I pretty frequently, and they would always bring something to give to my sons. And one day they came and they read a letter, and some of you have probably heard this letter before and some of you haven't, but it always resonated with me because I'm a mother and I'm a mother of boys. And I would like to read it. Grandpa wrote this letter when he was in World War II, and he wrote it to his mother. He was very close to his mother. He adored his mother. The letter was read on May 27th, 1945, on WLW radio in Cincinnati, and mothers could submit letters from their sons, and in return, they would get $5 in war stamps. So I'd like to share this letter, if I can pick it up. Dear Mother, tonight I'm very lonely. I've never written that before, or maybe it's a shock, and then again, maybe you've read between the lines and have known all along. I gotta put my glasses on, sorry. I was really trying to do this without this, but. When I was on the line, it didn't bother me much, but now I'm away from the outfit, and it seems I may be away for quite some time. It's a funny kind of feeling. It's as if I were detached and surfing the scene through the wrong end of the telescope. I've tried to drown out my feelings by reading, but the stuff I read only makes me realize how much I miss good reading material. At night I lie awake and I think of the time or two a year and a half ago when the outfit was formed. A brand new unit, all men straight from every street and all ends of the country and all walks of life. At first we were apt to be a little intolerant and sharp in judgment of one another's faults. But after a time we were drawn closer by the press of hard training and a common goal. It was no longer irritating to me when a fellow in the next bunk came in boisterous late at night. I understood it was his way of blowing off steam. After a time, we made our first jump, and then came the day we got our wings. I remember how proud I was when I came home. Then, more training, and then England. After a period of training, parachute failures, plane crashes, and serious injuries, and a death here and there, then Normandy, a nightmare of noise, mangled bodies, and death. It didn't seem to bother me at all. Then back to England, and as I walked through the barracks, I realized now how empty the place was. All those guys weren't coming back. Replacements a few weeks, and then Holland, another nightmare of burning planes and death, a trip to the hospital and back to the outfit. Even more empty bunks this time, more replacements, a few weeks rest, and then Bastogne. Hunger and piled bodies. Now all I can do is think and think. Now all those guys who started with me and who are still with me wouldn't overcrowd an average living room. Often I've knelt by the body of a pal and thought of things we've done together. It's peculiar, but there's never any connection between the fellow in my mind and the battered shell of flesh and bones beside me. As I look back, I think of home with an apathetic numbness. It seems so far away that it seems impossible that I'll ever get back. As I look forward, I can see only endless cycles of death, and my turn comes. Mother, I want you to know I'm not afraid to die. I've done very little for which I'm ashamed, and I feel that God will forgive me. You know, I'd love to see home once more. It would be so nice to lie in the soft grass along the still-watered river in the summer and watch the fish slide through the cool, deep pools, to see the snakes slither around in search of frogs and mice, while the squirrels in the tall elms chatter at the birds that disturb their slumber. In the evening, it would be nice to sit with Edith and the family, with Bing nuzzling my hand and whining for attention. Mother, you and I have always been good pals, and if you remember, I always came to you with my troubles. I don't feel bitter about my lot, nor do I wish any mother's son in my place. I just want you to feel that I'm a little boy again, coming to you with a scratched knee or stubbed toe. It makes me feel better to share my thoughts with you. And if I don't make it back, I hope I can make you proud of me for the part I played in the war. Lovingly, Jimmy. Whew, so. As a little girl, I always say that my grandpa was not the warm and fuzzy grandpa, right? My grandma was the lover. But the last year and a half, I've gotten to see a different side of my grandpa. We would drive to the VA, we would talk about how pretty the sky was, and he would tell me exactly what cloud was in the sky. We would talk about the trees and the changing season and how pretty things were. He was always so positive. But don't mind you, he would let me know if I was speeding. We would go to Walmart, and his cart would mainly consist of cans of cat food, about 30 cans of Campbell's soup, 2 boxes of large Raisin Bran, because you get more for your dollar if you buy the big box, and half creamer, because that's what he liked in his Raisin Bran. People would laugh at us. I would be yelling at him because he couldn't hear me. he would be telling me count out 12-star chicken soups, and I would count out 12-star chicken soups and put them in the cart. We would drive to Tractor Supply and buy every animal in Sugar Creek Township something to eat. I always said, if you're gonna be a wild animal, you wanna live at 2465 Stewart Road. Because they knew when they were getting fed. Then we would get home and I would usually be in my work clothes, and then you would say, are you gonna unload these bags? So I would, tripping over whatever through the basement with these big honking bags of seed. I would unload every single one of them. I've gotten to know a softer side of my grandpa. When I think about it, I'm a little sad. My grandpa would not want any of us to go away sad because he was so positive. And those of you who've known him for some time know that he has definitely endured a lot of tragic in his life, but he still remained so positive. He recently told me, if you focus on the negative, you can't accomplish your goal. And that stuck with me. But as you go away today, don't go away sad. What my grandpa would want you to do is to go home and love your wife. He would want you to tell your wife you love her, something he often regretted after my grandma Martin died. He would want you to provide for your family in whatever capacity that looks like, but provide for your family. He would want you to be involved because he was passionate about what he believes in. Don't sit around and talk about the problem, but be a problem fixer. He would want you to love your country, and I mean love, love, love your country. And he would want you to support your military. As I stand here today, I would not be transparent if I didn't tell you that I am sad. My grandpa was my staple. I knew no matter how far, how long, where I went in this country or this world, when I got back to Bellbrook, Ohio, and I go down Stewart Road, Grandma and Grandpa Martin would always be there. I am a little sad. My world's a little darker. My daily routine has been forever changed. I would, between meetings, run to Grandpa's. I would get him 6 sausage patties from McDonald's because that's what he wanted. I would tell them to put it all in one container because it was for my 101-year-old grandpa. Sometimes they looked at me like I had 9 eyes, but I knew if I took it in different containers, he'd let me know it was wrong. I learned to cut his strawberries exactly like he liked them, but then I learned that Marcia could cut them even better. So as I go away today, I am a little sad, but I just want you to know that as you go away, my grandpa would not want that. If I haven't had the chance to tell you thank you, I know Roger and I thank all of you from the bottoms of our heart. I say it's been Team Grandpa the last 3 weeks-ish, and I can't thank all of you enough for everything that you've done. Thank you. Next up is Mark Bando. He's a historian, but most importantly, a dear friend to my grandpa.
Yes, folks, and tonight Bando's suffering from a bad head cold and I'm losing my voice, but I'll do the best I can. They told me that I'm limited to 5 minutes of speaking tonight, and anybody that knows me, when I get my mouth going, it's hard to shut up after 5 minutes. So I wrote a script today and I timed it. I might go 1 or 2 minutes over, but that's about it.
Only 5 minutes.
So it says, for those of you who are wondering who this Asian schlub is that's standing up here and why I'm here, my name is Mark Bando. I started interviewing World War II vets in the 101st Airborne over 50 years ago in the late 1960s. I never stopped talking to them, and I've interviewed over 1,000 World War II survivors of that division. And I've authored 6 published books on the subject and 2 more on other subjects. and I was a cop in Detroit, uniform patrol on the street for 25 years. And during all that time, every time I had days off, I was traveling all over this great country, interviewing World War II survivors, until I reached a total of about 1,500 altogether, counting guys in other units. I first became aware of Jim Martin when I read a story he sent to George Koskomaki for his first book, D-Day with the Screaming Eagles, which was published in 1970. That story still remains one of the most powerful 101st tales I've ever heard, and I've heard thousands of them. The D-Day story involved Jim's platoon leader in G506. It was a tall West Point graduate named Turner Chambliss. Lieutenant Chambliss was well-liked and respected by the men in his platoon, but he got in trouble during stateside war games. On a certain maneuver, the troops were told that anything goes, and whatever tactics won the war game would be acceptable. Whoever made that rule didn't reckon with Turner Chambliss, who could fly a small single-engine airplane. Chambliss stole an airplane, flew over the enemy forces, bombing them with sacks of flour, and the authorities threw the book at him and put disciplinary memos in his personnel file, stating he had exceeded his orders and violated the rules of a war game. And this ruined Lieutenant Chambliss's prospects for promotion, and all his men knew he'd gotten a raw deal. Jim Martin stated that Lieutenant Chambliss was the most idealistic officer he'd ever met, and he also noticed that Chambliss talked constantly about West Point, even when briefing and training his 506 paratroopers. Jim used to sew patches onto the uniforms of his buddies for 50 cents a patch, and he got an idea to bring the question, are we Army or West Point? He made a stencil and applied the words West Point to the chest of the jump jacket of every man in his platoon. When those troops stood formation for the first time, with every man wearing that wording on their jacket, they were expecting an uproar from their platoon leader. But to their great disappointment, Lieutenant Chambliss made not a single comment on what he saw, and in fact, he pretended he didn't even see it. Fast forward to D-Day and the Normandy invasion, Chambliss's men had assembled on either side of their objective, a wooden road bridge across the Douve River east of Carentan. The bridge could support vehicles and was 283 feet long. German troops were 100 yards away across the river, and the opposing sides could raise up above a tall earthen berm on each bank of the river and take shots at each other. So they were swapping rounds across the river. Near dawn, Lieutenant Chambliss was sharing a hole with a sergeant from H Company, and he was troubled about something not pertaining to the combat situation. He told this sergeant how the men of his platoon had stenciled West Point on the chest of their jackets, and he wondered if they were mocking his background. Soon after bringing that up, Lieutenant Chambliss raised his head above the top of the berm and was shot through the mouth. His last attempt to speak was gurgled through his bloody mouth, "Were my men mocking me?" And then he died. Jim Martin reported to George Koskomaki how terrible he felt about this incident, and this was 25 years later. And word about what Chambliss had said quickly spread throughout the U.S. positions. As Chambliss's body was carried past Jim's hole, being taken back to the aid station at the fort and farm, Pee Wee cried, and it was the only time he cried in the whole war. He later wrote, "I couldn't understand how Lieutenant Chambliss failed to perceive the great respect and affection we had for him." So long before I ever met Jim Martin in person, I had read that story and I knew some things about him. His sensitivity, his intelligence as a skilled writer, and the emotional pain he would carry forever after the war. I felt honored that he saw a kindred spirit in me because he knew I wrote pot-stirring editorials for the Detroit PD newspaper, and Jim was never one to keep quiet and he saw perceived abuses or incompetence in his local politicians. There are prices to be paid for displaying moral courage, but Jim didn't care about that, because speaking out the truth for what he perceived as right was more important than anything. We shared that conviction. We've paid the price. Jim died with relatively little material wealth, and I'm going to die poor too. But there's some things that are more important. As a token of our mutual respect, Jim gave me his dog tags around 1993 and his Ike jacket at his 101st birthday party earlier this year. And that's the jacket that's displayed on that extra small mannequin over there in the corner. I had to order a special one because my regular mannequins, the jacket wouldn't fit on it enough where I could button the buttons in front. So I just got that one in the mail about 3 days ago and got it just in time to dress it up and bring it here. It was an honor and a privilege to associate with Jim, and the priceless gifts he gave me were also a thank you for the 6 published books I've written about the outlandish and colorful heroes he served with in World War II. He was well aware of what a wild bunch they were, and he was really proud of them. He was more of an observer. He watched and observed what they did, and he was in awe of them. So it was an honor and a privilege for me to associate with Jim and his fellow Screaming Eagles, and truly, no thanks were expected. And in recent years, many people asked Jim if he had a secret to longevity. He said, "What do you do to stay healthy?" He replied, "I don't do anything special. I eat whatever I want." I didn't know until tonight what he ate at home, but I know when he went out to eat, his standard evening meal was usually 2 tacos from Taco Bell, washed down with Mountain Dew. Until about 4 years ago, his doctor told him, cut out the Mountain Dew, there's too much caffeine and sugar in it. And I don't know if he took the doctor's advice or not, because he always did what he wanted to do. Oh, anyways, let's see. Jim was guided by an inner compass of wisdom and moderation. Even though he wasn't a churchgoer, his immediate relatives, his elders, were very involved in the church, and their values and morality must have been internalized by him completely. His inner compass and wisdom steered him away from excesses of alcohol, tobacco, or infidelity, and all the other pitfalls. And all this contributed to the fact that he's outlived about 98% of the troopers he served with. His exemplary life was a virtual role model. Jim always said he was nothing special, not a hero, although he felt proud and privileged to serve. He was always matter of fact, down to earth, humble, and above all, honest. I think everybody that talks about him tonight's going to say the same thing, and everybody that knew him knows this to be true. I jumped with Jim on the Airdy drop zone in Holland on September 17, 2019, for the 75th anniversary of Operation Market Garden. That day, I brought his dog tags back, and I said, "Jim, do you want to wear these dog tags on the jump?" And he said, "No, Mark, I gave them to you, you keep them." I said, "Come on, Jim, you got just put them on long enough to jump." So I took his ball cap off, and I put the chain around his big ears, and I hung the dog tags on him, and he did jump with them. And after we were on the drop zone, the media really crowded around to interview him, and he made a point of handing those dog tags back to me and telling the media the story of how he gave them to me 2 decades earlier, and I loaned them for the jump, and he gave them back to me. So anyways, there's a lot of stories about Jim that I could tell, but my time's up, so I'll just say that everybody who ever knew Jim, not just his family, but his friends and admirers, they know that he was a unique person, and they'll never forget him, and we're all going to miss him. So that's what I have to say tonight. Thank you for being here. Next, I want to introduce Jim's really helpful assistant from the past decade plus. Doug Barber also lives in Ohio here. He's a retired school teacher. He started taking Jim back to the European battlefields about 15 years ago. And without Doug's help, those tours never would have happened. So where are you, Doug? He's going to come up and say a few words now, please.
I'm a retired history teacher. I taught next door here in Centerville for 34 years, and it was my pleasure and good fortune to meet Jim Martin in May of 2010. I had made video memoirs for many World War II veterans for a number of years, and so was called in to record Jim. If I remember correctly, he had been in a documentary on the History Channel in 1999. I know there had been an article or two about him in the local Xenia Gazette, but beyond that, Jim Martin, World War II paratrooper, was simply not known in Bellbrook other than maybe by a few friends. So when I was doing some preliminary research to make his video memoir to suss out the questions, I found 2 pictures of him on the internet. And they had been taken when he returned to Toccoa in 2002 for the 60th anniversary. So I didn't really know anything about Jim Martin. Come to find out, I had gone to school with his daughter, but again, he was not known at the time by many. And so I got him on the phone and I said, "Are you Jim Martin?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm Jim Pee Wee Martin." Okay. And so I asked him some questions and he seemed keen to do the interview. So anyway, I came and interviewed him. We hit it off personally right away, and it would be difficult for me to describe you in words what the next 12 years meant to my life. He was a real character in his own words. To give some broader perspective, according to the Department of Veterans Affairs and the World War II Museum in New Orleans, of the more than 16,200,000 Americans, men and women who served in World War II, less than 1% remain alive as of late 2022. According to the Center for Disease Control, the average life expectancy of an American male is 77 years in 2022. And I think we all here can be glad that Jim beat that by nearly a quarter of a century. We spent quite a bit of time together for the last decade plus, and one of the things that Jim brought up, not only to me, but I'm sure to many of you, is I can't believe how long I've lived. He was really continually astounded of how that, he was in his 90s and how good his life was at that time. But he always told me, each day is a gift. Do with it the most that you can, because you're never promised a tomorrow. And another famous phrase, or another phrase that I found particularly insightful was, life is not a spectator sport. We all know Jim could be very happy sitting in his favorite chair in his living room or on his porch on a nice day, but he also liked to get out and move. When I started, after our interview, and we kind of connected so well, it became obvious to me that, and this is pretty common among World War II veterans, especially at this stage, they thought their war would be forgotten. I think all of us know that's not going to be the case. But they didn't think that younger generations were perhaps as interested in it as they would have liked. There's kind of been a renaissance in the interest in World War II. Most historians date it back to June 6, 1984, when President Reagan made the famous speech at Pointe du Hoc, and then you had a lot of very popular media, Saving Private Ryan, obviously, Band of Brothers, and other documentaries and so forth. And so Jim, it became obvious to me from early on that he was interested in getting out and doing what he could do to promote interest in the legacy and the lessons of the Second World War. I said, well, if you want to reach the younger generation, you have to go where their eyeballs are. And even a decade ago, it was in social media, Facebook, YouTube. Later, there would be other platforms that would come along. And so I showed Jim what Facebook looked like. I showed him what a public figure Facebook page would look like, which is a little bit different than the personal pages that many people have. and showed him, this would be a good way to connect with people who are interested in this. And so we set up a Facebook page, and I'll never forget, it had been on, I forget how long, just a few weeks, and we were both thrilled that he had 500 followers on his Facebook page. I checked this morning, currently Jim has 38,827 followers on his Facebook page. After we began to travel, I produced videos and photographs and stuff. We had some media. We set up a dedicated YouTube channel. He now has over 4,400 subscribers to his YouTube channel. He had by far the largest social media presence of any World War II veteran. For many years, Jim and I traveled to many states and many countries and did a presentation called From Toccoa to Bavaria, a World War II experience, where Jim would stand up behind a podium and I would run about 150 media behind him, slides, some video, and a lot of photographs, and he would tell his story from Toccoa to Bavaria. And he would impart wisdom about other things to the audience sometime. I always crossed my fingers that not too much barracks humor would sometimes make it into his presentations. Jim loved traveling to different events, not only across the United States, but in Europe. He loved to go to Currahee Military Weekend each fall, held in Toccoa, where, of course, he trained in 1942. He loved to go to the Show of Shows in Louisville each winter because he saw a lot of good friends there. He had an especially good time when we traveled to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to record a documentary for the Smithsonian Channel. And, of course, some of you know that President Eisenhower, that's where his retirement home was, because he commanded one of the early tank battalions in World War I there. And none other than Susan Eisenhower came there and gave Jim a private tour of her grandfather's home during our time in Gettysburg. He traveled to D-Day, Ohio. He went to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans and many, many other places. During all these years, he met many noted people. He met Secretary of State John Kerry while standing at Pointe du Hoc and gave him a piece of his mind. He went to many events where the Band of Brothers actors were, and Jim was real keen to meet them because he really enjoyed their performances in that HBO series. In 2014, he made the acquaintance of then commander of the 101st Airborne Division, General McConville, and let me tell you, General McConville and he have kept up a correspondence ever since in the next 6 or 7 years. He met Bob and Liddy Dole when he did his honor flight to Washington in 2011. He met Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Richard Myers and had an extended conversation with him, where again Jim pulled no punches about his view of current military strategy. But the thing that he enjoyed most, and he told me this again and again, was to be able to meet members of the general public. He went in all these events, especially as World War II veterans became fewer and fewer and more precious and precious. Everybody wanted his autograph. He would stay, I've seen him stay on multiple occasions with a line longer than this room. I've seen him stay sometimes past midnight signing until every single person in line got his autograph. Beyond what the other attendees would do. He was always the last one to leave if there was somebody who wanted a picture, wanted an autograph or something like that. The greatest joy for him was meeting members of the general public. If you want to know the impact Jim had as far as media presence, simply go home, put Google up, and type in Jim Pee Wee Martin and tell me what you see. Page after page after page after page of interviews that he's given, sometimes just to school children, or CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, major network. There's just dozens and dozens and dozens of interviews with Jim on the news. So thanks to Jim Martin, many people are aware of and interested in the Second World War. Mission accomplished, Jim. Thank you. speaker is the youngest child of Jim's son, David, Courtney Myers.
Thank you, Doug. Alrighty. Alrighty. Again, I am Courtney Ann Myers, or I am Myers now, was originally Martin, and my dad was David Joe, and I'm actually wearing a little pin that my dad gave me as a little girl. Obviously, he kind of trickled down to us the importance of airborne, in which I had no idea what it meant until recently. Just kidding. But, you know, many of you do know him as Jim Pee Wee Martin, and I had no idea what Jody was going to say today, but you'll hear a lot of echoing it's a testament of just what it felt like to grow up as Grandpa Jim's granddaughter or grandchildren. But you guys know him as a war hero. You know him as a giant, a pillar of courage, of strength, and honor. And you know a lot of stories about him that you personally heard from him, that you read in books and you saw in documentaries. But to me, I knew him as Grandpa. Yeah, I'm proud to be his granddaughter. He is fierce, he was determined, and he was very, very humble. And he didn't have to say what to be, but it exuded through his living and his choices. And in his fierceness, he embodied it very well. After the war, he came home and he had a dream to have land so his children and their children could enjoy that land and play on it. And we did play on it. It was magical, absolutely magical, some of the best moments of my childhood. Tunnels under the lane, the cable swing into the pond, the ladder swing in the trees, the vast woods to run through, the hog roast down at the Martin Hilton, the beautiful array of flowers in the garden that my Grandma Martin worked so very hard on, in which Grandpa would hide the Easter baskets for us to find every single year. Truly, truly magical, and there's just so much more that land holds for us. And as Jody was talking about, he married a woman who Grandpa thought would be a great mother and that would take care of his kids and would show hospitality for their family together. And they really did. So Grandpa was a war hero, but he was also a great example of someone who intentionally sought out and fulfilled his dream. And I was so proud that at the end of his life, I was like, Grandpa, like you made your dream come true. How many people can say that they really sought it out and made their dream come true? And I was just so proud of him and for him. My favorite thing to hear him say were, I love you too. And to see him smile. I love to see him smile. When I wasn't in person, I do live out of state. When I wasn't in person, I would call my grandpa and he would say, hello. I would say, Grandpa, it's Courtney, I love you. And he would say, I love you too. Click. Oh, I guess he's done. If it was, how are you doing? He would be like, what time is it? It's 7 a.m. Hell, I'm still in bed. And I would say, I just wanted to know if you were okay. And he goes, I am, thanks for checking, I love you. He always cracked me up. Am I doing that? Am I moving around too much? Okay, it's going in and out. Recently, in one of my last conversations I had with Grandpa in person, I was able to tell him how much I truly, truly appreciated about him. And one night, he reached out to hold my hand, which just made me cry. And I again said, Grandpa, I love you. And he said, I love you too. And this time he said, I know you love me. And his eyes got really big. And I said, I know you love me, because you worked so hard to make your dream come true for us and your children. And his eyes got really big and said, yes. I thanked him for being the hardest worker I ever knew. And my grandpa was. He was always there growing up. He was always in the background working super hard. And like Jody said, Grandma was, helping us get our swimsuits on and cleaning us up and cooking and teaching us. But Grandpa was always there, working really hard. And I got to see an amazing example of a work ethic. And Grandpa was a source of security and stability. We always knew that he would be there at his house. And in a world where people are moving all the time, to know that Grandpa and Grandma were always there at that house gave the whole entire family a sense of stability. I am so thankful for that pillar of stability that he has been for all of us. And in the past few weeks, when Grandpa's health was fading, he didn't want to be alone. He just wanted to be surrounded by family and his friends whom he loved very much. And he would tell me over and over again, I don't care about things. He said, all that matters is family and friends, and I have connection all over the world, and it's those people that matter. And as he was growing weaker, he just wanted people to be by him. And I told Grandpa, you are not alone. And he wasn't alone. And none of us really are.
When I walk through deep waters, I know that you will be with me. When I'm standing in the fire, I will not be overcome. Through the valley of the shadow, I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. In the midst of deep sorrow, I see your light shine through. The dark night will not overtake me. I'm pressing into you. Lord, you fight my every battle, and I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. You amaze me, you redeem me, and you call me as your own. You amaze me, you redeem me, and you call me as your own. You're my strength, you're my defender. You're my refuge in the storm. trials. You've always been faithful. You bring healing to my soul, and I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me.
Thank you. So our next guest that's going to come up here and speak, her name is Marcia Treadway. She is a very, very dear, sweet friend of my grandpa's.
I have props. And I'm vertically challenged. Okay. I too have many, many stories, but I had to choose them to keep them on a good time frame tonight. But I want to tell you that Jim and I have been friends for almost 3 decades. Many years ago, I was a newspaper reporter assigned to this community. The first township meeting I attended, I saw a small, thin man nearing his 80s, speaking to the trustees, pounding his fist on the podium, telling them they were breaking the law according to the Ohio Revised Code. I believe Jim knew the Ohio Revised Code by heart. As he walked to a seat, he passed by me asking, "Are you the new reporter? Call me. I have documents for you." A few months later, I took him up on his offer. Inside his house, I saw all the World War II memorabilia on his living room walls. While he wanted to only talk about township business, I inquired about his military service. It was at that moment I received the most interesting living history lesson of my life. After hearing about World War II stories that don't exist in the history books, I inquired about his early childhood. Born in Pennsylvania and living a short time in Indiana, his family settled in Dayton. He attended Kaiser High School in North Dayton, the same area my grandmother raised her children. Come to find out, he and my Aunt Annie were classmates. He even helped my aunt with her homework. Jim's nickname in high school was Dictionary, because he pretty much knew something about everything. Jim was a year older than my aunt, and I asked him about that. He matter-of-factly said, "Oh, when I was a young boy, I was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and I spent almost a year away from my family in a sanatorium, and that put me a year behind in school." Laughing, he told me, "Turned out I never had tuberculosis." I said, "That's terrible." And he said, "That's just the way it is." My time as a reporter helped me land a job with the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Local School District. Jim headed an organized group against additional taxes from school levies. It is my opinion he controlled 10% of the swing vote. The first bond levy I worked on ended up in a loss of just a handful of votes. When the district put the bond levy back on the ballot, he said, "Marcia, I'm on a fixed income, and I am against more taxes." However, I know working on passing this levy is part of your job, and I can't go against you. I will not vote for it, but I won't campaign against it. The bond levy passed that time by a handful of votes. Time passed. His shoes, like the boots he had worn and wore, had trodden so many paths, sometimes making as many enemies as friends. Then he lost his wife, Donna, and the regrets began to trickle in. Suddenly there was a softness I never saw. Jim and I could talk about anything and everything. We were honest about our feelings, and we did not have to agree, but we agreed on one thing. We must profess our love for one another now, before it's too late. At that moment, I listened as he confessed his regrets to me that day. He said, "I've said some pretty mean things over the years, and I wish I could take them back. You see, I really didn't mean the things I said." Then he talked about his wife. Donna once asked me why I didn't say I love you to her. He said, "I show you love every day by going to work and providing for you and the family." She said, "It would be nice to hear you say the words." "I never did, and now I regret it," said Jim. He continued, "Donna enjoyed going out to dinner, and I didn't. Now I wish I took her out more. My advice to you and everyone is to tell your spouse that you love them. Tell them every day. I don't want you to feel like I do now. I would give anything to have one more moment with Donna to tell her I love her." Even with this advice, actually, saying those 3 words was still hard for Jim. As he got older and as his friends were leaving after a visit, I watched as they said those 3 words to him. At first, he would just look at them. Then he would nod his head and say, "Thank you." Finally, he began responding with, "I love you." Jim and I did not need to say those words. Then one day as I was leaving, he touched my arm and said, "You know I love you. I always have." Another way Jim showed his love was sending you home with a grocery bag full of canned goods. Sometimes a can of fruit, but mostly cans of soup. Receiving this gift weekly, our pantry soon began to overflow. One day, as he was handing me yet another bag of Campbell's soup, he said, "I don't give this to you because I think you need it. I give it to you because I want you to have it." For many, Jim will be remembered as a soldier and a war hero, leaving behind historical artifacts, books, and documentaries. For me, and for all of you, that sometimes cantankerous man leaves behind something a bit unexpected: his own legacy of love. Jim, thank you for your friendship, honest advice, and enduring love. I will treasure our time together for the rest of my life. Godspeed, my friend, and soup's on. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Barry Tiffany, Sugar Creek Township Administrator, and Jim's official best friend.
Thank you, Marcia. I just want to go on record and say I never got a can of soup from Jim Martin. I got Esther Price chocolates. Yeah. That's how it is at the top, right there, Marcia.
That's what best friends get.
Yeah. So in 2005, I started working in Sugar Creek Township. I think it was April 9th. And Jim Martin came in my office that first week and explained to me how things were going to be. Surprising, right? And I explained to Jim that that probably wasn't going to be the case. And we hit it off. I mean, we had a mutual respect for each other. I appreciated his opinions. He was very opinionated. He was always right, unless I was right, which I was right. So, but we had great conversations. It got to the point Jim would come in the office every week, at least once a week, for years. For more than probably 30 years, Jim did not miss a township trustee meeting in Sugar Creek Township. He showed up. There's a saying that you get the government that you deserve. What that means is if you don't participate, shut up. He made sure he was going to get the government he deserved. He was vocal. He made a lot of people mad. There's no question. He embarrassed some folks because, as the judge pointed out, he was right. He came prepared. He was always well armed with knowledge. He would come in my office at least once a week. It got to the point where I said, Jim, let's set a time. Come in on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock. And that's your time. And he would. He would show up Tuesdays at 11 o'clock. And we would talk about local politics, national politics, world politics, and World War II. And he told me stories from World War II that were just unbelievable, the things that he went through in his time in the service. One of my favorite stories that he told me was I think it was Bastogne, just before Bastogne, they were brought in, they were going to get some leave time. They turned in all their coats, their guns, everything, and got ready to leave. And then the commander came to him and said, guys, got bad news, we're going back out. And we don't have any coats, and we don't have any guns. So they had to scrounge to get things while they were out. Now, during that time, Jim didn't take his boots off for 6 weeks. He didn't unlace his boots. So when he ended up at the infirmary, they took his boots off, and his socks that were wool socks had gelatinized. They had turned to gelatin on his feet. So they didn't pull them off, they scraped them off with tongue depressors. So Jim, fast forward, he's 96 years old, he goes to the VA, he's got some health issues, he goes to the VA, and this doctor says, it says here that you've got some damage to your feet, some frostbite damage. He said, yeah, I did. He said, guy, so you've never been compensated for it. You've never been paid for that injury. He said, I didn't want to be paid. The doctor said, well, fill out this form and we'll get you paid. He said, I'm not filling out the form. I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't want it. The doctor said, take the form, fill it out, bring it back. Next time Jim came back, the doctor said, where's the form? He said, I threw it away. Right? I don't want it. The doctor filled out the form. And at 96, he started getting paid for the injuries he had received when he was 22 years old. Wow. I don't know how you make that up, right? To him, after all those years. They were stuck out in the cold. They were starving, fighting from field to field. It was in France. They came across a cow laying in a field, dead, had been struck with a bomb and concussed her, but it was laying there dead. And they cut some steaks off the cow, and they cooked those, and they ate like kings that night. And the next morning they were talking, and it was so delicious. They said, let's go back. It's cold out, the meat's probably still good, we'll go back and get more steaks. So they went back down, and the cow was up walking around the field with steaks cut out of its backside. It was just knocked out. It wasn't dead. So some things you don't know about Jim Martin. Jim enlisted, this might shock you, in the Navy. He enlisted in the Navy. He went to work, he told his boss, I'm going to enlist. His boss says, the hell you are. You make me $5 a day, you're staying here. And Jim said, no, I can't do that. I've got a conscience, I feel guilty. All these guys with families are going over. Here I am single, I've got nobody. I need to go. His boss said, well, then you're out of here. So he left, and he went to the Naval Enlistment Office because Jim had seen at the movie theater submarines, and he thought, man, I really want to be on a submarine. That's cool. So he enlisted in the Navy, and they tested him and said, okay, we'll see you in 6 weeks when your submarine will be done. We'll give you a call. He said, well, wait a minute, I just quit my job. And you're telling me it's going to be 6 weeks? The guy said, maybe 6 weeks, could be longer than that, but we'll get in touch with you. So Jim walked out. He can't go back. His boss is mad at him. He's lost his job. He's got nothing to do. He looked down the hall, and there was the Army Enlistment Office. And he enlisted in the Army on the same day. Fast forward 6 weeks, the Navy is at his mom's house asking for Jim because he's AWOL. He's absent without leave. He didn't show up. And his mom said, he's in the Army. What are you talking about? So somebody mentioned Taco Bell. I don't remember which one of you mentioned Taco Bell. Jim ate Taco Bell for lunch almost every day for years. And it was the same thing every time, 2 soft tacos. And he told me he went to the Taco Bell one day and the girl said, Mr. Martin, we got a whole menu of stuff. Don't you want to try something different? And Jim's response was, I've been sleeping with the same woman for 70 years. When I find something I like, I stick with it. Jim and Donna built their house themselves with their own hands right out here on Stewart Road. You can, if there weren't trees, you could see it. And actually, when he built it, there were no trees. It was wide open. And it took them, I think, 7 years total to build the house. They had 5 kids in that time. They built a barn. They lived in the barn while they built the garage. They lived in the garage while they built the basement. They lived in the basement while they built the first floor. They just kept adding kids and rooms. When Jim and Donna were pouring concrete down near the road for a pipe they had put in for the driveway, Donna was pregnant. I don't know which kid she was pregnant with, but she was about due, and she fell in the creek. And it started her labor. And she said, Jim, my water's broke. We need to go to the hospital. And he said, okay, let's go. She said, well, let's finish this first. And they did. They did. They were like that. One of the best stories Jim told me, I asked Jim during those Tuesday meetings, I said, Jim, did you ever have problems with the water out there? And he said, no. I said, well, did the county ever come out and inspect your well? He says, hell no, they're not welcome on my property. You know that. These people aren't welcome out there. He said, so here's the story with his water. When he started building out there, there's a spring that comes out of the ground on the hillside behind his house, where the house is being built. And it's good water. That's why Jim Martin moved to Sugar Creek Township. It was out away from things, it had good water, and there were no trains. Those were the 3 things that he looked for. That's why he located out here. So Jim dug a hole below the spring where it came out, and it collected water. And he and Donna would go out with a pail and tote the water to where they were staying at that time, the barn or the house, wherever. And Jim got an idea, and he took his Model A Ford and cut the back end off of it, and went to the west side of Dayton and got a 4-foot long, 4-foot round piece of concrete pipe. And he strapped it with chains on the back of that Model A Ford, and the people there said, you're never going to get to Sugar Creek Township on the dirt roads, there's no way. And he did. He made it all the way here, and he made it up the drive, and he made it up the hill above the spring, and as he started to back up, the chains broke. And the concrete pipe rolled off, bounced off a tree, and landed exactly where it needed to be. So now the concrete pipe fills up with water, and it's cleaner, right? Doesn't have dirt, it's cleaner. And they would go out and get the water out of the concrete pipe, keep a cover on it. And then Jim put a pipe from the concrete pipe. he put a steel pipe to the house and put a hand pump outside. And then he moved the pump inside into the kitchen, and then he added an electric motor. And I want to say he had 3 motors in the time on that house that pumped the water into the house. It's still pumping water out of that concrete pipe today. Is that why he lived to be 101? Maybe. So I said, Jim, did you ever have problems with the water? Did it ever dry up? He said, no. He said it kind of tasted funny one time. I took the cover off and there was a dead groundhog in there. So I took it out. A couple days later, it tasted fine. The lesson here is he was a simple man that lived a very simple life. That's the lesson. I don't know who's, let's see, Karen Waldron, you're next. So Karen is from Nashville, Tennessee. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Nashville? Yeah. Karen is a country artist, international recording artist. And Karen came out, oh gosh, over a year ago. Was it the spring of 20?
May 18, 2021.
There you go. She came out around May 18th, 2021. Yeah, and we sat in Jim's front yard under a canopy in chairs, and Jim told her his story of his life and his time in the service. And together they wrote a song, and Karen has recorded it. There are copies of it back there on the table. They're available for $60, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Anyhow, if you give a donation, you can have a CD. She just released this 2 weeks ago, is that right?
Well, the new record. We actually released Normandy in June for the 78th anniversary of D-Day. That was the first time we dropped it out. And we remastered it, put it on our new record, and this has just been an unbelievable whirlwind of, I just can't even believe it. It's just crazy. It's absolutely insane.
This is Karen Waldron.
Thank you.
101st, first to fight on the 6th of June to save the world that night. 1944, never fought before. Teenage kids all geared up, ready to win that war. We sat outside, his handbells on, and he told me about his life. 100 years old, remembering every moment of that fight. In the morning, the storms rolled in. It was completely silent, jumping in the open fire. Explosion, one continuous flame. A hell of a sight to see. Normandy, Normandy. He said that's another thing that they don't understand. We had to win the war, risk losing this free land. We sat outside, his handbells on, and he turned on the porch light. When I asked him if he'd do it again, he said, "You're damn right." In the morning, the storms rolled in. It was completely silent, jumping in the open fire.
the next item on the agenda here tonight is a letter from Michael Seiler. Michael Seiler was a great friend of Jim's. I believe he was at one point in time a township trustee. I spent many times trying to protect him from Jim. But as with me, he became a close friend. And Mike has submitted this letter that he's asked us to read. I am saddened by the loss of Jim Pee Wee Martin. I am sad and disappointed that I am not there to celebrate his life well lived. I met Jim about 38 years ago during our first political adventure together. Since then, we have been good friends and allies on many issues, both political, civic, and personal. When I first met Jim, he never brought up the fact that he served in the World War II. Jim never talked about himself. He always got to the point and he moved on. Most of you have had a chance to talk with him on the phone and remember when he was finished with it, he usually ended it with, "Okay, thanks for calling, bye," and he hung up. He worked hard, he raised his family, loved life, and lived simply. In his early years, he and Donna would have gatherings around the pond and invite friends and family and politicians from all over Greene County. He knew everyone, never talked about who he knew unless you asked, never forgot what you or someone else said to him, and could recite the Ohio Revised Code better than many lawyers. Jim always dressed the same: a white t-shirt, a blue dicky pants, and if it was cold, a flannel shirt. Some years ago, Jim met Doug Barber after a conversation Doug and I had after the church one Sunday. Doug and he hit it off right from the first meeting, and after a while, they traveled the world to tell Jim's story about the war, boot camp, jump school, and for Jim, anything they wanted to talk about. Doug got Jim to change his wardrobe for most occasions, but not all. I would often say to Jim, "Why do I always see that smile on your face when you're photographed standing next to a lady, but not a man?" And he would turn to me and just smile. I remember reading one day on Doug's Facebook page, "I never thought I would say my best friend is a 92-year-old man." That's who he was to so many, a best friend. Rest in peace, my best friend, at the Dayton National Cemetery, where you will be proudly received, and I can still visit you and Donna frequently. Mike Seiler. Our next item is Bob Liebeck. I think I got that right? Okay. And Colonel Retired Joe Alexander, the 506th Airborne Infantry, Assistant President, Currahee Battle Flag Pins. Hopefully I didn't mess that up too much.
I'm here on behalf of the 506 Airborne Infantry Association, representing them tonight, and where I also serve on the board of directors. Tonight we're presenting Jim's family with a Currahee Battle Flag. It is customary and tradition in the 506 Association that when a 506 unit deploys to a conflict zone, we make sure they're equipped with this battle flag, and the units actually carry this into the battle space. On this, the predominant emblem on here is the paradise. Literally, it is a paradise, one with a 5 on it, the other with a 6 on it. There in the background is a parachute canopy, and then in full attack mode is old Abe with his talons extended. Also presenting some pins with the flag and the Currahee crest. It's also customary, traditional, that when a Currahee falls on the battlefield, is killed in action, we present this family to the next of kin.
My name is Chad Myers. I married Courtney Ann Martin, and having married into this family tonight, I'm hearing some wonderful stories about Jim for the first time, and I'm sure some of us are. I've been inspired by his story, his life, and how he chose to live, and I'm humbled and honored to be able to pray with us tonight. Would you please pray with me? The Gospel of John, chapter 15, verse 13 says, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." And I suppose if that's true, then Jim considered all of us friends. He gave his life so that we may enjoy the freedom that he fought to secure for us. And tonight, he is in our mind, he is in our heart. We remember you, Jim. We remember you as dad, grandpa, great-grandpa, friend, best friend, fellow soldier, hero, inspiration. We remember you and we honor you. We love you and we humbly say thank you for your service. You lived long after the war was over, but you were not done fighting battles, as so many have told us tonight. You fought the battle for your dream of land and a simple life and a family, and you brought that into fruition. You fought the battle of telling your story and telling the truth of so many friends that you had lost during the war. You fought the battle helping other people know that this is a country worth fighting for. And I pray that tonight we would fight to keep you alive in our memories and our stories, that we would share them proudly with friends, family, and strangers. We pray that the strife, battles, and wounds of war would be calmed for eternity in God's loving grace. May you find rest at last and know that those left behind cherish your spirit, honor your commitment, and we send you off with love. We will never forget your life, your service, your sacrifice. We commit you to the Father's tender watch care. Amen. And now for some closing remarks, the Honorable Tom Rose.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Martin family wishes to thank you all, the close friends and admirers of Jim Martin. The family would also like to thank the Kindred Hospice, Sugar Valley Golf Club, Connor and Coke Funeral Home of Bellbrook, the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Schools for providing transportation, Green Velvet Sod Farms for the parking, 101st Airborne Division, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, for full burial detail, the 506th Airborne Infantry Association, the World War II Reenactment Group, Patrol Riders of Ohio, Patriot Riders of Ohio, Skydive Greene County, and Skydive Pawtucket, Florida, Miami Valley Communication Council for live streaming services, and all who supported Jim Pee Wee Martin's life and legacy, His legacy will live on through the Veterans Memorial being built here in Sugar Creek Township. To learn more, you do need to visit jimpeeweemartin.com or follow on Instagram at jimpeeweemartin. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the service. At this time, you may exit to watch the 21 gun salute and the playing of taps. Providing honors, the World War II paratroopers, reenactment funeral honors team. And further, you're welcome to join at McIntosh's Pub and Grub in Bellbrook afterwards. And I guess I need to finally say that Sugar Valley Golf Club will remain open, serving drinks at this time. So ladies and gentlemen, is there anything further? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all.
So the 21 gun salute will take place out here in the circle in just a few minutes.
Very, thank you. Those are great stories. There's so many. So well, I really, it's nice.